Hello, friends. Aaron here with a question. Who do you trust? And why do you trust them? Today, and increasingly so, as the time wears on here, you see plenty of this newish meme about trusted experts. And I just wonder who you trust and why you trust them. And do you really question that in your own heart and your own mind and look into why these people, these institutions these private entities, these corporate entities that pass as government agencies, what is it about them that makes them trustworthy? Do you even know why you're listening to them? Are you watching TV? Because if you are, the big reason why you're believing it is because you're told to. Over and 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 over again. On social media, on the news. It's beaten into your head in your programming that you watch. It's in every article that you read, if you read. Why do you trust them? Why are they trustworthy? And I've looked at this a number of ways, and I could really pick a dozen different angles and come at it, and I could talk about this for an hour, and I don't really want to. I was going to read about these people that I'm just going to mention here, but I'm not going to. I went back to Frank E. Young, the 15th commissioner of the FDA. And then we went on to David A. Kessler. David A. Kessler, he was actually a pretty decent guy. Jane E. Henney, Mark McClellan, Lester Crawford. There's one you can find out about. Charged with conflict of interest and lying about stock he and his wife owned in companies that were being regulated by the FDA. Now, he's not the only one who's been charged, but there's plenty of other problems here. And other people have talked about this. You can look into this for yourself. If you just go on to Wikipedia's page and you click on these people's links, they're not going to tell you much, if anything, about these people's post-FDA career. Most of them have connections to drug companies, either being heading up some part of the drug company, some division, being on their board of directors, being paid tons of money as consultants. You'll also find that some of these people were consulting for drug companies prior to being on the board for the FDA. There's Andrew von Eschenbach. He's a good guy to read about. Biotime, biotechnology. I believe that stem cells and vaccines, what his company's working on. He served under Under Barack Obama, you had Margaret Hamburg. She was a piece of work. She was being investigated, and I don't know what came of that. Ultimately, I read about her in 2016, 2017. I think maybe it was 2016 that she was being investigated. But I also did read about her husband, who is supposedly a very knowledgeable person working for a artificial intelligence company. She's a really interesting person. There's some side roads to travel down with Margaret Hamburg that are very interesting. You can read about Stephen Ostroff. Well, he's a little harder to find some information on. Robert Califf, lots of information about Robert Califf. Scott Gottlieb is another one. And then the more recent ones, Sharpless, Giroir, and Han. Not much out about those guys yet. But conflict of interest, to say the least. Money being made, consulting for drug companies, hiding the fact that they own stock in companies that were regulated by the FDA, going to work for companies that they... And you got to dig for this if you're interested. Or you can find, it's getting harder. The problem is it's getting harder to find the information from the independent journalists, and that's what they are. People say, you get all your information on YouTube. Let me tell you something. There are people on YouTube, independent journalists, and for whatever reason sometimes they've got kind of a broad spectrum of things they're looking at. And sometimes they've sort of focused in on certain things, corruption in a particular place, uncovering lies in a particular avenue, particular area. But the research that some of these men and women are doing is exceptional, and I mean, far outstrips mainstream media as a rule. But they're belittled and made light of and made fun of, and it's getting harder and harder to find their work. I've seen a lot of it, and I can say this over and over again. You don't have to believe me, but one of the things that I do when I come across something like that is I take notes and I start looking into it for myself. So somebody's saying that there's corruption and conflict of interest with the FDA, the commissioners, and not just commissioners but other officials in the FDA. And I'm not even going to talk about that, but you could find that information if you want to. It's there to be seen. It's there to be found. So do you trust the FDA? I'm going to get a little bit more into that, and I'm not even going to talk at all about. You can look this up, and I really wish you would. Corruption at the NIH. I mean, anything from nepotism, making up positions for spouses to get certain people to work there, and it's really about prestige, more than anything, in that sense. Waste. Ethical questions, whistleblowers, the things that you can read, you can find, and it's harder to. And I don't mean testimony like congressional testimony necessarily, though there is some of that. Now, when you talked about CDC, NIH, FDA, but just testimony that people have given who were working in these organizations, whistleblowing, and the things that they've suffered and dealt with since then. I'm not going to read a whole lot about that. CDC, we're not going to read too much about the CDC. Back, I think it was in 2016, I forget how many, it was a fairly large number of scientists who worked at the CDC actually filed an ethical complaint saying that officials at CDC were being influenced monetarily by corporations. CDC claims that they don't get any of their revenue that they use to operate from corporate interest, although there's plenty of evidence that they do get gifts and indirectly. But again, I'm not going to get it all out. And there's plenty of stuff. There's plenty of stuff out there for you to find if you want to. And I'm not even really so much interested in talking about all of that stuff. Gosh, I mean, you could start at the beginning. You could start at the beginning of your search results, which tend to be kind of directed by the algorithm to keep you away from seeing some important truth. But even at the top, what you find is concerning. Institutional corruption at the FDA. I'm not going to read it. More than that, what I wanted to read. And I didn't even begin to talk about in these notes that I have here, wireless dangers, electromagnetic fields, the dangers in how our water is treated. I'm really not going to talk specifics about food, what's in the food. I mean, I could be here all night talking about these things, and we have for years researched these things for ourselves, found out and it's such a pain in the butt. It's almost second nature to us now. It's taken us years. I mean, frankly, it's just like years of hard work. There's no easy way for this because they just hide it. Just to mention food, when I was younger, I don't know, in my teens, I think it was, or there was. Companies were labeling foods like bread, packaged bread, as being light bread. giving people the idea that it had lower calories, and the color was lighter. And that might sound funny, but these kind of stupid games, and games that are much more complex, much more intricate and tricky, are constantly being played. And I'm just going to tell you that these food companies that are now, and people counted this as being a victory against genetically modified foods, the processes that these companies used to make their genetically modified foods, they don't use those processes anymore. And the legislation, I guess, was it that was enacted, is it a law? I'm not quite sure how you'd put it, requiring these companies to label GMO foods. It's very narrowly defining what GMO foods are. And in that very narrow definition of GMO foods, we're looking at only the foods that they're making with these processes that are now obsolete. And so they're beyond that. They're using new processes, and those processes are not in that narrow definition, and so they're not labeled as GMO. So I'm telling you, you got food that is telling you that it's non-GMO. It's just as stupid. It's just as childish. It's just as trick of the hand kind of thing as saying that it's light bread and making you think that it's just lighter. No, it's not genetically modified, but the processes that they used, that they narrowly defined, these food companies have now moved beyond these things. The chemical companies, they're not food companies, but they've moved beyond these processes. And there's very few foods on the market now, as a rule, that are being produced using these old genetically modified processes. And so you think you're eating food that's not altered. It is altered. More and more of it is. And we are now asleep. The people who wanted to fight to have our food labeled so we would know if we were eating genetically modified food. If you're not growing it yourself, you truly can't know. That's just one thing. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about all of that stuff. I just want to give you some statistics. Now, I don't like statistics. I think statistics lie. But these are statistics from the people who are telling you what you need to do now. Don't go be by your loved ones. You'll kill them. There's something psychologically wrong with you if you want to cover your face. It's perfectly safe to cover your face. It's illogical to imagine that it reduces your oxygen intake and increases your carbon dioxide intake. Wear goggles, wear a face shield. Don't kiss your spouse if you're gonna, have physical relations with them. Don't wear a mask around your pets. I'm not gonna get into all this stuff, but these things that we're being told, well, these are the same people who are telling us these things that I'm gonna tell you. First of all, by a couple of $1,000s per person, the United States spends more money on health care than any other nation. Yet we're 46th in life expectancy. You've seen these things, you've heard these things before, but let me just drive this home. I was born in the 70s. In the 1970s, when I was born, 1 in 10,000 kids was autistic. 1 in 10,000. By the time I graduated from high school in the 90s, 1 in 1,000 kids was autistic. By the time Teresa and I had our first kid, 1 in 110 kids were autistic. Now our oldest kid is 15 years old, and about 1 in 40, maybe 1 in 50, on the best, kind of guess, is autistic. And the projections moving forward are terrifying. 1 in 7 adults has chronic kidney disease. That's 15% of American adults. 37 million Americans, chronic kidney disease. Over 30 million Americans have diagnosed heart disease. Diagnosed. How many are not diagnosed? 12.1% of American adults are diagnosed with heart disease. 650,000 Americans die from heart disease each year. Number 3 leading cause of death, by the way, is Dr. Error. Dr. Error. I have that somewhere. Where is it? Yeah. I want to see how they put it. Yeah. The system is to blame. Medical industry, cancer industry, food industry. It's an interesting, it's not an accidental use of words, I think. Industry, economic activity concerned with the processing of raw materials for manufacture of goods in factories. Cancer. It is a fact that chemotherapy drugs are carcinogenic. That's a fact. This is not made up. You can look at a number of them. There's Cytoxin, there's cisplatin. I don't even know how you say this. I don't care. Reasonably anticipated to be human carcinogens, and are carcinogenic in lab rodents. You can. I don't know. This is what I do. You can do this if you like. You can look up a list of chemotherapy drugs. You can find blogs where people talk about what happened to their loved ones, what happened to them when they were on those drugs. You can find the inserts for the drugs and see what it says. Chemotherapy drugs are cancer causing. Radiation therapy causes cancer. And it causes scary cancer. Second cancers, they call them, related to treatment. It's not possible to predict who might get a second cancer, but sometimes having cancer treatment can put a person at higher risk for second cancers. Radiation therapy was recognized as a possible cause of cancer many years ago. Post-radiation exposure is one risk factor for most kinds of leukemia, including acute leukemia, myelogenous AML, chronic myelogenous leukemia CML, acute lymphoblastic leukemia ALL, and then there's MDS, myelodysplastic syndrome. That's bone marrow cancer. And we're talking about systemic cancers that have really high mortality rates. These are the cancers that are caused by radiation therapy. And you can look at how much money is being made all the way down to the oncologists selling the drugs. Cancer is an industry. You and I having cancer is an industry. And I've talked about this before. Hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars are being spent in some cases on some of these facilities. The people who run these facilities are outrageously rich. A lot of people down the line are rich. And the people who work hand in hand with the dying, and I know a couple. I think they're torn, frankly. I'm not speaking for them. They've not given me any leeway to do that, but I think they realize the damage that they're doing with the drugs and the radiation. But I have read testimony and heard testimony of people who've made a lot of money doing things that they were beginning to know were wrong, but it took them quite a while at that beginning of understanding to finally move to a place where they could walk away, because the lifestyle that they had, the life that they'd built, the money that they needed to continue that lifestyle held them there. 39% of people in America, as of today, will develop cancer at some point in their life. Even people who had cancer as kids and beat the cancer are many times more likely to die early, like in their 50s instead of their 80s. America is the fattest nation on the earth. Almost 40% of Americans are obese, clinically obese. 20% of kids are clinically obese. I'm not even going to get into dementia, Alzheimer's. People my age have dementia and Alzheimer's. It's hard to find an answer about how many American adults are chronically ill. I'm not going to get into what I did find, but I can't just spit out some stats to you, so I'm not going to bother with it. But they say that if you don't count obesity, which is a serious problem, 43% of American kids have at least one of 20 different chronic illnesses. All of them are serious. Something that you might not think is serious, like asthma, very serious for a lot of people. And the majority of this 43% had 2, 3, 4 or more of these chronic illnesses. Diabetes, can't find numbers about how many American kids are diabetic, but you can find plenty of articles talking about the exponential growth, the explosion in diabetes, not just type 2, but also in type 1 diabetes, which is, still rare, they say, in kids. Still way less than you see it in adults, but alarming increases in type 1 diabetes in kids, not just type 2 diabetes. But there are 29 million diabetic American adults, they say. 1.4 million new diagnosed cases of diabetes every single year. Third leading cause of death. Physician error. Doctors making mistakes. Started reading about some of the drugs that have been withdrawn. And, to say that they're, to look at the ones that have been withdrawn is not even half of the story because so many of these drugs haven't been withdrawn. I found a number of studies, all very fascinating things to read, but a study that was done about the drugs that the FDA approved from 2001 to 2010, a total of 222 drugs, nearly 1/3 of those had serious safety issues post-market. After going through tests, safety tests, and going to market with them, serious safety issues. Out of the 123 that were talked about had some sort of safety issues, whether they were serious or not, post-market, 61% of those required black box warnings to let people know about serious health risks or life-threatening health risks associated with taking those drugs. I found a list, and it's an incomplete list. It's hundreds and hundreds of drugs worldwide, and you could find, anywhere from like 32 to a couple hundred. I don't know what the number is exactly, and I don't know that I'll ever find it. Drugs that have been withdrawn from the market by the FDA. And one of the reasons for that is because some of the drugs that were withdrawn by the manufacturer when the idea of problems were presented, and they pulled them off the market before the FDA officially did so. And when you look at the revolving door, it really is from the people who run the FDA and the drug companies. It's not hard to imagine that bad publicity, if it can be avoided, is being avoided by letting these drug companies know that it's time for them to come up with a new drug to fill that market hole that's going to be created when they pull the drug that could be withdrawn from the market by the FDA. But if you just look at some of these ones that were withdrawn, I'm just going to read some of these to you, and we'll kind of end with that. Accutane. Teresa actually worked as a senior pharmacy technician at Walgreens for a number of years before we got married, and a little while after we got married. And this was a drug that she remembered giving people for acne. And it just kind of made me think about how I had acne when I was in my teens, and it continued on to my adulthood. I had adult acne well into my early middle 20s. And I went to a dermatologist. A dermatologist, frankly, they can like snip your warts off, freeze them, they can do some things for you, but treating skin problems, they don't know what they're doing. I mean, they just don't. Sorry, dermatologists, but you don't know what you're doing. Guy wanted to give me 2 different antibiotics I had to take 3 times a day, basically indefinitely. I'd probably be dead now, frankly, if I had done that. I did it for a little while. My first wife, she wanted me to continue taking them. She said, why don't you just take the pills? I'm like, I've researched this. I was researching this kind of thing 20 years ago to find out, like, people have serious blood infections and all kinds of problems in their body because of overuse of antibiotics. And they're overprescribed and all the issues. And they've been talking about this for decades. And you're still overprescribing antibiotics. So it doesn't fix anything, does it, talking about it? I had to make a personal decision not to take it. By the way, my acne's cured by diet change. I was still dealing with acne, a lot less, into my 30s. I don't deal with it at all anymore. But we've made some pretty major changes. And, that wasn't one that we talked much about, but I don't have an acne problem anymore. And it wasn't because I took Accutane. Well, Accutane caused increased birth defects, miscarriages, premature births when used by pregnant women, inflammatory bowel disease, and suicidal tendencies. On the market for 27 years. Bextra was on the market for a few years. Pain relief. Caused serious cardiovascular adverse events like death and other problems. Serious skin reactions. Toxic epidermal necrolysis. I looked into that. That's not nice. Just to maybe deal with some pain from playing tennis or something. Liver toxicity, lots of these drugs. Hepatotoxicity, liver toxicity. Look, if your liver stops functioning, you die. You need your liver. And our livers are super unhealthy, as a rule, in the world today, in America, especially in the West. Darvocet, this is one Teresa remembered. 55 years on the market, Darvocet. 55 years. Didn't come off the market until 2010. An opioid pain reliever. Anybody wonder why we went to Afghanistan to go find bin Laden? Serious toxicity to the heart. Thousands of deaths reported. I'm sure it was a lot more than the ones reported. Darvocet. That was a bad one. Anti-diabetics. I'm not going to read too much about that one. This one was really interesting. Now, this was off the market back in the 70s, but I just got to say, people think we're so much smarter now in 2020 than people were in the 70s. Go back and look at news from the 70s and how they talked about the doctors then. Look, those people were gods, man. They were idols then. They knew everything, swine flu. Go get your shot, Are we really any smarter now? Is it really about intelligence, or is it about something else? Is it about money? Is it propaganda? The propaganda is not really much different now, but they've ratcheted it up. And I'm not even going to say they've gotten better at it. I think we've gotten less able to see it. Stop watching your TV. Trusted experts who brought you Darvocet. This DES, I'm not even going to try to read what it is. 31 years on the market. Synthetic estrogen to prevent miscarriage, premature labor, and other pregnancy complications. And they've got, this is a good link. I'll put this one in here, giving you some of the old ads. Those are super telling. Everybody's always smiling in the ads. Basically, if you just want to have a healthy pregnancy, you've got to take this drug. It's going to help you have a healthy pregnancy. Except that it's going to cause cancer of the cervix and vagina, birth defects, other developmental abnormalities in children born to women who took the drug while pregnant, increased breast cancer risk, more likely to die from breast cancer if you get it, risk of cancer in children of mothers taking the drug, early menopause, testicular abnormalities, potential risks for third-generation children, the grandchildren of women who took the drug. There is a good one. These are not just outliers. There's a lot of these, a lot of them. It's going to kind of painkiller. Hey, I got, I pulled my hamstring. People having massive liver damage, dying, and having liver transplants. And look, getting a transplant is not the end of your problems. Rejection drugs, lowered life expectancy, on it goes. I'm going to run out of time here. So I'm just going to zoom down here. I'll leave this link. You can read these. Some of this stuff's in. There's one that was like psoriasis. I've got a little itchy elbow. I've got psoriasis. I'm going to take this drug, and it caused like brain damage that was like always fatal. You die because you had brain damage. I'm not even going to tell you what that drug was. The last one on here that I was going to mention, I would read most. Oh, Quaalude. That's a really good one. 23 years in the market, came off 1985. Quaaludes. It's a good article in here about that one. Not an article, the ad. One of these was an antidepressant that caused, suicidal tendencies. Just not funny. It's insane. It's insane. Who do you trust? And why do you trust them? Why are you trusting these people? Why are you trusting these agencies? Why are you trusting these men and women that hide behind corporations? No personal liability. Zero liability for vaccines. Zero. Who's held accountable for this? Who's held accountable for the fact that we're sick and fat and dying and stupid? Can't remember anything. Who's held accountable for that? You're accountable, and I'm accountable. If you believe this, all of this, it's all lies. You're trusted medical experts. Wake up. Take responsibility for you. Believing that you are a walking biohazard. More people have died from overdoses and suicides since the beginning of this boogeyman than the official death count, which is bullshit. And that's statistics that your trusted experts tell you. More suicides and more ODs. And people aren't well. We're not well in this country. You keep trusting them, I guess. Then it's on you. It's your fault. Open up your eyes. Shalom, friends. Until next time.